Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava, page 173b. Actually, we just started the Mishnah, so let's maybe start it again. It's just the very last line of 173a. The Mishnah says, "Hamal ve'es chaveiroi al yidei orev lo yipara min orev." One who lends money to another with the assurance of a guarantor cannot collect debt from the guarantor. I don't understand that. What's the point of a guarantor if you can't collect it from the guarantor? One who lends money to another with the assurance of a guarantor cannot collect the debt from the guarantor. Not sure what that means, but anyway, okay, that's what they're saying. V'im amar loy. Now we're top of 173b. V'im amar loy. Almanas shepar b'mi she'elsev yipar min orev. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel oimer im yesh nechasim leloive ben kach lo yipar min orev. But if the creditor said to the debtor, "I am lending the money on the condition that I will collect the debt from whomever I wish," maybe the point of the guarantor is that he guarantees that he'll give money to the borrower, but he can't collect it from him directly. He can only collect from the borrower, but the guarantor is just guaranteeing that he'll give money to the borrower. Maybe that's, I'm not sure what the difference is, but anyway, okay. But if the creditor said to the debtor, "I'm lending money," okay, either the debtor or the guarantor, you can collect the debt from the guarantor. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says if the debtor has property of his own, then whether in this case, whether the creditor stipulated its condition, or in that case, whether he did not, he cannot collect the debtor from the guarantor, the debt from the guarantor. וכן היה רבי שמעון בן גמליאל אומר אור ולי שביקשו בעשו והיה בא אל המגרשו ידירנו הנאו שמייסו כנוניו על נכסים של זה ויחזיר על אשתוי. And so Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel would say, if there is a guarantor for a woman for her marriage contract, from whom the woman can collect payment of her marriage contract instead of collecting it from the husband, and her husband was divorcing her, the husband must take a vow prohibiting himself from deriving any benefit from her, so that he can never remarry her. This precaution is taken lest the couple collude kenunya to divorce in order to collect payment of the marriage contract from this guarantor's property, and then the husband will remarry his wife. And that is the Mishnah. The Gemara says, "My time, Rabbi Rav Yosef, Amar Tavayu, Gavra ashlimt li Gavra ashlim alach." The Mishnah teaches one who lends money to another with a guarantor cannot collect the debt from the guarantor. The Gemara first understands that the Mishnah is ruling that a guarantor's commitment is limited to when the debtor dies or flees. What is the reason the guarantor's commitment is limited? Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef both say that the guarantor can tell the creditor, "You gave a man over to me to take responsibility for him. If he dies or flees, I have given a man back to you. The debtor is here before you. Take your money from him. And if he has nothing, suffer the loss yourself." Oh, so guarantor is only if he dies or if he flees. But if he's in town, you have to try to collect it yourself. Maskiv Rav Nachman Haidino Barsoi. Rav Nachman objects to this. This is Persian law. Adraba. Basar Arvazli. The Gemara interjects, on the contrary, the Persian courts go after the guarantor directly, without even attempting to collect the debt from the debtor himself. Why then did Rav Nachman say that excusing the guarantor from payment is Persian law? The Gemara clarifies Rav Nachman's intent. Rather, Rav Nachman meant to say that this kind of ruling would be appropriate for the members of a Persian court who do not give a reason for their statements, but issue rulings by whim. Rav Nachman was saying that it is not fair or logical to excuse the guarantor and cause a loss to the creditor who was depending on him. Ela Omer Rav Nachman, Mai lo yipor min orev, lo yitba orev tchilo. Rather, Rav Nachman said, what does the Mishnah mean when it says that the creditor cannot collect the debt from the guarantor? It means that he cannot claim payment from the guarantor at the outset until after it is established that the debtor has no means to repay the debt. After the borrower defaults, the creditor can collect the debt from the guarantor. Tanya Nami Haki Hamal V'Schavero Yalidei Orev Lo Yizba Orev Tchila V'im Amar Amena Shepara Mimi Yashalza Yidba Orev Tchilo. This halacha is also taught in a brisa. One who lends money to another with the assurance of a guarantor cannot claim payment of the debt from the guarantor at the outset. Rather, he must first attempt to collect the debt from the debtor. But if the creditor said to the debtor, I am lending the money on the condition that I will collect the debt from whomever I wish, he can claim payment of the debt from the guarantor at the outset, bypassing the debtor. Rav Huna said, from where is it derived that the guarantor becomes obligated to repay a loan he has guaranteed, as it is written that Judah reassured his father concerning the young Benjamin, I will be his guarantor. Of my hand you shall request him. Genesis 43, verse 9. This teaches that it is possible for one to act as a guarantor, that an item will be returned to the giver. Rav Chizda objects to this. The incident involving Benjamin is not a case of a standard guarantor, but a case of an unconditional guarantee, as it is written also in the context of Benjamin, that Reuben said, deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him back to you. Genesis 42:37. One who undertakes unconditional responsibility for a loan has a different status than a standard guarantor, as will soon be elaborated. Therefore, a biblical source has yet to be adduced to teach that one can become a standard guarantor. Ela Omer Rav Yitzchak mihacha lakach bigdoi ki orev zo lakach bigdoi ki orev zo lokach bigdoi ki orev zo. Rather, Rav Yitzchak uba'ad nochniach havalehu. Rather, Rabbi Yitzchak said that the source is from here. Take his garment, that is surety for a stranger, and hold him in pledge, that is surety for an alien woman. Proverbs 20:16. The verse advises a creditor to take the garment of a debtor's guarantor as payment for a loan. Ve'omer beni im oravto le'rayacho tokato lezor kapecho nokashto be'im reficho nilkadito bimreficho asay zois eifo beni v'hinatzel kivos b'chaf reyecho lech hitrapes u'erhav reyecho im mamon יש לו בידיך Ater li pisat yad, vimlav harbe alav yerehim. And it is stated, my son, if you have become surety for your neighbor, if you have shaken your hands for a stranger, you have become ensnared by the words of your mouth. You have been caught by the words of your mouth. Do this now, my son, and save yourself, seeing that you have come into the hand of your neighbor. Go, humble yourself, hitrapes, and assemble your neighbors. Proverbs 6, 1-3. This last part of the passage means if your neighbor's money is in your possession, as you owe it as a guarantor, open up the palm, ater pisat, the palm of your hand, and repay him. And if it is not money that you owe him, but rather you have become ensnared by the words of your mouth and owe him an apology for personal slight, rather gather together many neighbors through which to seek his forgiveness. Amar Meimar Arev Mishtabed Machaloikes Rav Yehuda Rav Yoisi Domar Asmach Dekanyo Arev Mishtabed Rav Yehuda Domar Asmach Dekanyo Arev Loi Mishtabed. A Meimar said, the issue of whether or not a guarantor in fact becomes obligated to repay the loan he has guaranteed is a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. According to Rabbi Yossi, who says that a transaction with inconclusive consent, a smachna, affects acquisition, a guarantor becomes obligated to repay the loan. Whereas, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that an asmachna does not affect acquisition, a guarantor does not become obligated to repay the loan. Any obligation one undertakes that is dependent on the fulfillment of certain conditions that he does not expect will be fulfilled. In this case, the debtor's default on the loan is considered an asmachta. Ravashi said to Meimar that he was conflating these two issues, but it is a daily occurrence. It is taken for granted that an asmachta does not affect acquisition, and it is also taken for granted that a guarantor becomes obligated to repay the loan he has guaranteed. Amar Elamar Ravashi Be'ahu Hano Dekamehem rather, Ravashi said, through that satisfaction that the guarantor feels, when the creditor trusts him and loans the money based on his guarantee, the guarantor resolves to obligate himself to repay the loan. Guaranteeing a loan is unlike a usual case of an obligation undertaken that is dependent on the fulfillment of certain conditions that he does not expect will be fulfilled, in which the commitment is not considered a real one. Here, the one obligating himself experiences a sense of satisfaction when the money is loaned to the debtor, and due to that, fully commits to fulfill his obligation. V'im amar Menashe mimi esherse amar Rabbi Bar Chana amar Rabbi Yochanan lo shana ela she'ein nichosim laloivi. Obligation nichosim laloivi loipo. The mission teaches if the creditor said to the debtor, I'm lending the money on the condition that I will collect the debt from whoever I wish, he can collect the debt from the guarantor. Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says they taught this only when the debtor has no property of his own from which to repay the loan, but if the debtor has property, the creditor cannot collect the debt from the guarantor. Nichlal the Tanakama Saba Loi Shana Hachi V'Loi Shana Hachi. The Gemara questions this assertion, but from the fact that the later clause of the Mishnah teaches the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says the debtor has property of his own, and whether in this case, whether the creditor stipulated this condition, or that case, whether he did not, he cannot collect the debtor from the guarantor. By inference, one can understand that the The first Tane maintains that there is no difference if it is like this, and there is no difference if it is like that. Whether or not the debtor has property from which to pay the loan, the creditor can collect the debt from the guarantor. Chasore mechsera. V'hachi ketani. Hamal v'eschavera li'orev li'para min ha'orev. ואם הממלה שפרה ממי שארץ היא פרה מן הארץ. כמה דברים אמורים, במה דברים אמורים שאין נכסים ללויבה, אבל יש נכסים ללויבה לא יפרה מן הארץ. וקבלן, אף על פי שיש נכסים ללויבה, יפרה מן הקבלן. The Gemara clarifies the mission is incomplete, and this is what it is teaching. One who lends money to another with the assurance of a guarantor cannot collect the debt from the guarantor before the first claiming the debt from the debtor. But if the creditor said to the debtor, I am lending the money on the condition that I will collect the debt from whoever I wish, he can collect the debt from the guarantor. In what case is this statement said? When the debtor has no property of his own from which to repay the debt. But if the debtor has property, the creditor cannot collect the debt from the guarantor. This is the halacha with regard to a standard guarantor. But in the case of an unconditional guarantor, even if the debtor has property of his own, the creditor can collect the debt from the unconditional guarantor.